My name is Lauren Hayes. I was 34 years old, and I worked as a senior payroll specialist for a regional hospital in Columbus, Ohio. Every Thursday evening, before going to bed, I followed the same little ritual. I placed my worn blue leather purse on the oak chair beside my bedroom window, zipped it closed, and rested my wedding ring on top of it for a few seconds before slipping it back onto my finger. It reminded me that trust was something you practiced every day, not something you assumed would always be there. My husband, Daniel, had spent almost 2 years working overtime weekends, quietly building a savings cushion after we agreed to renovate the small bakery his late mother had once dreamed of opening. Every dollar mattered. At exactly 3 a.m., while I was asleep only a few feet away, his younger sister opened my purse, removed my credit card, and walked out without making a sound. Months later, that same moment would be frozen on a courtroom screen, paused beneath a digital timestamp that none of us could forget. What she never understood about that night was that the missing credit card was only the smallest thing she actually stole. The real theft had begun years before, hidden beneath family traditions everyone pretended were normal. Daniel's family had an invisible ranking system that nobody admitted existed. At every holiday dinner, birthdays, or Sunday lunches, the same people always sat in the same chairs. Daniel's parents occupied each end of the dining table. His older brother Michael sat closest to their father, and his younger sister, Vanessa, was always given the chair beside their mother. That chair somehow meant more than furniture. It represented permission. Permission to interrupt. Permission to borrow. Permission to arrive late, leave early, and expect forgiveness before offering an apology. My blue leather purse became my own private symbol of that imbalance, because every time we visited, Vanessa joked that I carried my entire life inside it. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, even though she often opened it without asking to borrow lipstick, gum, or my car keys. Daniel always looked uncomfortable, but he never challenged her. Neither did I. Looking back now, I wasn't simply a victim of those little moments. I helped normalize them by convincing myself that keeping the peace mattered more than setting boundaries. Daniel deserved better than the family script he had inherited. He was the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthdays without reminders and quietly fixed things around other people's homes before anyone noticed they were broken. The bakery renovation wasn't even for us alone. He wanted to honor his mother's memory by opening a neighborhood cafe where people could gather without feeling rushed. Every overtime shift he accepted ended with him placing another deposit into the renovation account. I watched him count invoices at the kitchen table with the same careful hands that later held mine whenever I doubted myself. Watching him believe so deeply in our future made me determined never to waste the sacrifices he was making. Because the renovation contractors required staged payments, we planned everything carefully. On Monday, I emailed the construction company confirming the first payment date. They replied in writing within 20 minutes. Tuesday afternoon, Daniel texted me to double-check that the credit card with the promotional financing remained inside my purse. I answered with a photo of the card tucked neatly into its inner zippered pocket. Wednesday evening, we reviewed the paperwork together in front of our financial advisor during a scheduled video meeting. Every detail was documented. Every deadline was confirmed. There would never be a question later about whether we had communicated clearly or protected ourselves responsibly. When Vanessa stopped by Thursday evening to drop off a casserole dish she had borrowed weeks earlier, she watched me slide the blue purse onto the bedroom chair before we all sat down for coffee. Smiling casually, she shrugged and said, "Family shouldn't keep score." She had used those exact words dozens of times before whenever someone mentioned borrowed money, missed promises, or broken plans. Daniel rolled his eyes without responding, and I forced a polite smile because challenging her over one careless sentence seemed unnecessary. After she left around 9:15 p.m., I locked the front door, checked the windows, and climbed into bed believing every important decision had already been made. I had absolutely no idea that just 6 hours later, the blue purse beside my window would hold everything except the one thing our future depended on. My phone vibrated against the nightstand at exactly 6:17 a.m. I reached for it without opening my eyes, expecting another payroll notification from work. Instead, The screen displayed a fraud alert from our credit card company. Did you authorize a purchase of $4,782.16 at Sterling Jewelers at 3:28 a.m.? Before I could even process those words, a second notification appeared. $2, 194.85 approved, Lux Avenue Boutique, 3:41 a.m. Then a third. $2, 023.74 approved, Executive Travel Services, 3:56 a.m. The total was almost exactly $9,000. My stomach tightened before my mind caught up. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my blue leather purse from the chair beside the window, and unzipped the inside pocket. The credit card was gone. Daniel was already awake because he heard the zipper shaking in my trembling hands. I showed him the notifications without saying a word. He searched every compartment of the purse while I checked the kitchen counters, the laundry room, even yesterday's coat pockets, although I already knew the card had been there the night before. Then he stopped moving altogether. His face changed in a way I had never seen before. "Vanessa watched you put the purse there," he said quietly. Neither of us wanted to finish the thought that followed. At 6:42 a.m., I called the credit card company and froze every transaction. The representative confirmed that the purchases had all been made with the physical card rather than a copied number. She also confirmed something that made my hands go cold. The first purchase occurred only 28 minutes after our home security camera recorded someone leaving through the front door. I requested copies of every charge while Daniel downloaded the camera footage onto his laptop. We sat beside each other without speaking, staring at a paused image of a figure wearing a gray hoodie. The face wasn't visible yet, but the height, the walk, even the white sneakers looked painfully familiar. I texted Vanessa at 7:03 a.m. My message contained only one sentence. Asterisk, did you take my credit card from my purse last night? Asterisk, she answered 3 minutes later. Asterisk, wow. Good morning to you too. Asterisk, I asked again. This time she replied with the same sentence she had used my entire marriage. Family shouldn't keep score. Reading those 4 words felt different now. They no longer sounded casual. They sounded practiced, almost rehearsed, as though every crossed boundary in the past had been preparing her for something much larger. Daniel called her immediately. I couldn't hear everything she said, but I heard enough. She insisted she had only borrowed the card because she planned to pay it back. She laughed when he reminded her that borrowing required permission. Then she repeated her favorite line. Family shouldn't keep score. When Daniel finally ended the call, he didn't raise his voice or throw his phone. He simply sat at the dining table where we had planned our bakery budget only 2 nights earlier and stared at the renovation folder. Every invoice, every contractor estimate, every handwritten calculation suddenly looked fragile. The unfinished bakery sketches were spread across the table beside the printed fraud alerts. One page showed Daniel's mother's dream storefront with flower boxes beneath the windows. Another held the financing schedule we had spent weeks organizing. The contrast hurt more than the missing money. On one side of the table rested years of careful sacrifice. On the other lay proof that someone inside the family believed all of it belonged to her if she wanted it badly enough. What broke my heart wasn't anger. It was Daniel's silence. He picked up one of the bakery drawings, smoothed the folded corner with his thumb, and whispered that we should postpone calling the contractors until we knew whether the bank would reverse the charges. His voice stayed calm, but I recognized the exhaustion underneath it. That cafe had never been about profit. It was about keeping a promise to his late mother. Watching him quietly calculate how many additional overtime weekends it might take to recover if the money wasn't returned felt heavier than any argument could have. As I stood there holding the empty blue purse, memories I had dismissed for years began arranging themselves into a pattern I could no longer ignore. Vanessa had borrowed my winter coat for 3 months without asking. She had taken Daniel's power tools and returned them broken. She once used my grocery rewards account because, according to her, I wasn't using all the points anyway. Every incident had ended exactly the same way. Someone would sigh, tell everyone to move on, and remind us that keeping peace mattered more than proving a point. I had accepted those explanations because they were easier than confrontation. The truth was far less comfortable. I hadn't simply been wronged. I had helped create the conditions that convinced Vanessa she could reach into my purse at 3:00 a.m., walk away with our future, and expect the family to excuse it by breakfast. By noon, the shock had settled into something colder. The bank had opened a fraud investigation, but they made it clear that because the physical card had been used, they needed every possible detail before deciding liability. Daniel left for work anyway. Overtime was still overtime, even on the worst day of our marriage. Before he walked out the door, he looked back at the blue leather purse resting on the kitchen counter instead of its usual chair. "Don't let anyone tell you this isn't serious," he said quietly. It was the first time either of us had admitted that this wasn't just about money anymore. I called Daniel's parents first. His mother answered on the second ring. Before I could finish explaining what had happened, she interrupted me with a tired sigh. "Vanessa makes impulsive choices," she said. "She's always been like that." I reminded her that nearly $9,000 had disappeared in less than an hour. There was a long pause before she replied, "If you report her, the whole family will suffer." Those words landed harder than I expected. The concern wasn't whether Vanessa had stolen the card. It was whether anyone would find out she had. An hour later, I met Daniel's older brother, Michael, at a small coffee shop near his office. I brought printed copies of the fraud alerts, transaction records, and the timestamps from our security system. I spread everything across the table carefully, hoping facts would speak louder than emotions. Michael barely glanced at the papers before pushing them back toward me. "She's your sister now too," he said. "Don't make it a thing. She'll calm down and fix it." I stared at him in disbelief. "She bought jewelry, designer clothes, and airfare before sunrise," I replied. "How is this not already a thing?" He rubbed his forehead and repeated almost the same words his mother had used. "Families survive by letting some things go." Driving home, I realized I had heard that sentence in different forms for years. Let it go. She didn't mean it. That's just Vanessa. Every excuse had quietly taught her that consequences belong to other people. At a red light, I remembered the time she borrowed my laptop for one afternoon and returned it 2 weeks later with a cracked screen. I remembered paying the repair bill because Daniel begged me not to embarrass her. I remembered replacing missing cash from my wallet after a family barbecue because I convinced myself I must have counted it wrong. None of those memories had felt connected before. Now they lined up with frightening precision, like puzzle pieces I had refused to assemble. The hardest realization wasn't about Vanessa. It was about me. Every time I stayed silent, smiled politely, or accepted an apology that never arrived, I helped protect the illusion that boundaries were optional. I wasn't just the person who had been stolen from. I had been one of the people keeping the system alive. That truth hurt more than the empty space inside my purse. Around 4:20 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was my longtime friend and former coworker, Denise. I hadn't called her. Daniel had. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything from the 3:00 a.m. theft to the conversations with his family. When I finally stopped talking, she asked one simple question. "Lauren, if a stranger had done this, what would you do?" "I'd cooperate with the bank and the police," I answered immediately. "Then why are you trying to invent a different rule because she's related to your husband?" I didn't have an answer. Denise wasn't angry. She wasn't dramatic. She simply refused to participate in the same excuses everyone else had repeated. "You're not destroying this family," she said calmly. "You're refusing to protect behavior that already is." Something inside me shifted when she said those words. For the first time all day, I felt permission to stop carrying everyone else's comfort on my shoulders. That evening, before Daniel returned home, I decided there would be one final opportunity to resolve everything peacefully. I called Vanessa instead of sending another text. She answered with cheerful indifference, as though we were discussing weekend plans instead of felony-level fraud. I kept my voice steady. "I don't want a public fight," I said. "Return every item you bought today. Meet me at the bank tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. We'll sign repayment paperwork together, and if everything is returned immediately, I'll tell the investigator you cooperated fully. This is your chance to fix what you did." She laughed softly, the same dismissive laugh I had heard for years. Then she repeated her favorite sentence once again. "Family shouldn't keep score." For the first time, those words didn't make me question myself. They simply confirmed exactly who she had chosen to be. I ended the call without arguing, looked at the blue leather purse beside me, and understood that protecting peace and protecting truth were no longer the same thing. The next decision I made would determine not only what happened to the missing $9,000, but what kind of life Daniel and I would build after trust had finally been forced into the light. The next morning, I didn't wake up hoping Vanessa would change her mind. That hope had quietly disappeared sometime after our last phone call. Instead, I woke up with an unusual sense of calm. At 8:45 a.m., Daniel and I walked into the bank carrying every document we had collected: the fraud alerts, transaction history, security footage, and written timeline. The investigator assigned to our case thanked us for organizing everything so carefully. He explained that the timestamps, purchase locations, and surveillance requests would likely answer every remaining question within days. For the first time since 3:00 a.m., on that terrible night, I realized we no longer needed anyone's permission to pursue the truth. 3 days later, the evidence became impossible to deny. Security cameras from the jewelry store clearly showed Vanessa presenting my credit card and signing the electronic receipt. Another camera captured her leaving the boutique carrying several shopping bags. The travel agency confirmed she had booked a luxury weekend package using my card. The total unauthorized charges came to $9,000.75 before the account was frozen. When the investigator called with the update, his voice remained professional, but the facts spoke for themselves. This was never a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. That evening, Vanessa appeared at our front door without calling first. Daniel looked through the living room window, then quietly asked if I wanted him to send her away. I shook my head. "No," I answered. "She can wait." She stood on the porch for nearly 20 minutes while we finished dinner. It wasn't meant to embarrass her. For years, everyone else had been expected to wait while she decided what mattered. For once, the pace belonged to someone else. When I finally opened the door, she looked nothing like the confident woman who had laughed on the phone. Her shoulders were tense, and she avoided looking directly at the blue leather purse resting on the hallway table. She tried her old approach first. "I didn't think you'd actually go this far." I simply replied, "The investigation followed the evidence." Then came the second familiar tactic. "So you're choosing money over family?" Months earlier, that sentence would have shattered my confidence. Now it barely moved me. "I'm choosing honesty," I answered. The money only revealed where honesty was missing. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then something unexpected happened. Vanessa quietly asked, "Is there any way they'll ever trust me again?" It was the first genuine question she had asked since this began. I thought carefully before answering. "My condition has never been about me," I said. "It isn't even about the bank. If you want a place in this family again, stop asking me for forgiveness first. Start by repairing what you broke with your brother. He spent 2 years working overtime because he believed our future mattered. That's the trust you stole." She nodded without arguing. Later that evening, Daniel invited her into the backyard while I stayed inside the house. They talked alone for almost an hour beneath the old maple tree behind our fence. I never tried to hear what they said. Some conversations deserve privacy even when they grow from public mistakes. When Daniel finally came back inside, his eyes were red, but his shoulders seemed lighter. He only told me that his sister had admitted the truth without excuses for the first time. The rest of their conversation remained between them, exactly where it belonged. The bank eventually reversed nearly every fraudulent charge after completing its investigation, and Vanessa entered a formal repayment agreement for the remaining costs and legal fees. She also returned the jewelry, canceled the travel reservation, and sold several expensive items she had purchased before the account was frozen. None of those actions erased what happened, but they proved she finally understood that accountability could not be negotiated away with a smile or a familiar excuse. Almost a year passed before our family gathered for another holiday dinner. This time, something small immediately caught my attention. No chair had been reserved for anyone. People simply sat wherever they arrived. The invisible ranking system that had shaped years of unhealthy behavior quietly disappeared without anyone announcing it. Daniel's mother served dinner without assigning places. Michael asked me about the bakery renovation instead of avoiding uncomfortable subjects. Even Vanessa waited until everyone else had filled their plates before serving herself. Near the end of the evening, she noticed my blue leather purse resting beside my chair after it slipped onto the floor. Without saying a word, she picked it up with both hands, placed it gently beside me, and stepped back. She never touched the zipper. She didn't need to explain why. That single gesture carried more weight than another apology ever could. 6 months later, the bakery finally opened. The first framed receipt hanging behind the counter wasn't from our opening day. It was the printed bank statement showing the fraud case had been closed. Daniel wanted to keep it as a reminder that our future had survived something designed to destroy it. Every Thursday evening, before going to bed, I still place my worn blue leather purse on the chair beside the bedroom window. The ritual never changed. Only its meaning did. Because trust isn't protected by pretending nothing happened. It's protected by believing that love without accountability eventually becomes permission. At 3:00 a.m., one stolen credit card nearly cost us $9,000, a family and a dream, but the thing we rebuilt most carefully wasn't our finances. It was the courage to stop confusing silence with peace, because the strongest families aren't the ones that never keep score. They're the ones that finally learn what should never be borrowed in the first place: someone else's trust.